Hey guys, the Superhero Bibliophiles episode you're about to listen to was originally part of the Superhero Cinephiles Book Club, an exclusive Patreon subscriber show I used to run a few years back. So if you're confused by out-of-date references or comments about the Patreon show, that's why. Now, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to the Superhero Cinephiles podcast. This is another episode of the Patreon exclusive book club, and this is the first episode where I've got a guest coming on, and that is Will Short. Will, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I can't wait to talk about Avengers Under Siege.
Yeah, so this is the comic we're talking about. It spanned a few issues in the 1980s run, 1986. And Marvel's official website, they list the reading order as numbers 270 to 277.
Oh, interesting.
But really, like 270 and up to 272, 270 and 271, they have some background stuff. 272 is the second part of a crossover with Alpha Flight. And then the Under Siege story really begins with number 273.
Yeah, with the big old Black Knight headshot on the front, with that border. I forget, what were they celebrating that year, Marvel, with all the characters on the border?
I don't know, but they did that. That was I think they were like they were doing that with a lot of covers at that time. Like every cover had that. That was the Mutant Massacre in X-Men, I remember too.
That's what I associate it with. Yeah, it's kind of like a funny, it's like, I guess you just, John Buscema being the artist, it's like, yeah, I guess I'll just draw a Black Knight head because it's going to be eaten up by, like a quarter of it is just going to be random small characters.
Yeah, and the credits on this, well, also, if you're interested in this collection, there have been a few collections of this. The one I have is the Avengers Epic Collection Under Siege, which not only includes all those issues I mentioned, it also includes up to issues 264 up to 264, 265, 66, 67, 68, 69, and also some West Coast Avengers issues. It includes the Alpha Flight issue from that crossover and Avengers Annual number 15 and West Coast Avengers Annual number 1. And those were part of a crossover with the two Avengers teams getting kidnapped by the government, which was actually the first Avengers comic I owned, was that West Coast Avengers Annual.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I bought it I found it like at a used store one time, and I bought it because it had who I thought were the Brotherhood of Evil mutants at the time, and it turned out they were calling themselves Freedom Force instead. So I was really confused as a kid.
Yeah. Our brains are more nimble thanks to weird Marvel continuity, I think at this point.
But the credits on this, it was Roger Stern and was the writer on all these issues, I believe, and then John Buscema was the penciler, with inks done by Tom Palmer. And then there are a lot of other credits on here, but they're for all the issues in the series, so I'm not gonna go through all of them. Sure. But basically, it's Stern and Buscema are really kind of like the main guys on this one. Yeah,
and it's interesting because I've been going through, I was already reading this era of Avengers when you had brought up doing one of the Patreon episodes where we're going to talk about a comic, and I was like, oh yeah, that'd be great. That's such a classic Avengers story and that's kind of the crown jewel, in my opinion, of this Roger Stern run, is this particular story. But Buscema stays on for a while after Roger Stern leaves. Like Walt Simonson comes on for a bit, and then once Buscema leaves, then Steve Epting comes on, or I'm sure there's some other turnover there, but Steve Epting comes on, but Tom Palmer, the inker, or as they keep labeling it, the finisher, which, I know that he's inking, but they keep explicitly saying Buscema breakdowns, and then right. Palmer, when you read those Steve Epting issues, especially once he gets his bearings, and then later the Paul Ryan ones as well, that are, like as you get more into the crossing and not my favorite Avengers stories, it still looks so much like these stories. It's less dynamic, I would say, and it's not as wild-eyed, because Buscema is kind of like, his anatomy starts getting wacky in this, but I kind of like it. But it's weird. Like, Tom Palmer is holding down the fort with each of the artists that come along. I feel like he is affecting so much of what we're seeing in this comic. Like, I know that inkers are underserved a lot of the time, but he really is defining what Avengers looks like for a very long time. here, like on into the 90s.
Yeah, I didn't realize that about Epting, but that explains why his style was so different from because first time I encountered him was on his Avengers stuff, and then later when he did Captain America, I remember being kind of surprised because I'm like, this doesn't seem like at all from what I remember.
And it was a younger Epting too.
It was a younger Epting too. Plus, it was the 90s, so it was probably trying to lean in more to the Image style as opposed to developing his own style.
I think it was the Ralph Macchio or whatever run of Avengers, or so, I forget who exactly is on when, but basically, yeah, it was a 90 when the Avengers started to want to be the X-Men because they needed sales more in the 90s, which some of that stuff I actually dig. But like again, Tom Palmer, I just did not realize and appreciate how much it kept the book looking stylistically the same and really making it feel like it kind of continuing what George Perez had done with the semi-realistic, dynamic, simple, clean art with a lot of lines.
Right.
Yeah.
So, you know what kind of struck me rereading this story is just, and I've read this not too long ago for the first time. It was like maybe about a year, maybe like 2 years ago was the first time I'd actually read this story. I read a bunch of other Avengers comics in the past, but I really came onto Avengers regularly with Busiek's run with him and George Perez did it. How about you? That was your also.
Well, that was my first one that I really followed and was like going to the comic store and buying because I think it was coming out when I was in high school and I was working a pizza parlor job, so I could, have money to spend on comic books. But, this particular run and the Avengers has a special place for me. I feel a lot of nostalgia for it, even though I was 3 years old when it came out, I believe. My cousin, who's about 15 years older than me, when I was growing up, he was a great big brother figure to me. He loved comic books. He was an incredible artist. I'm sure he still is. And so I just looked up to him in every way that a little kid would. And he had a huge box of the best 1980s Marvel comics, kind of the shooter era stuff that would be, and that included this particular run. And he would talk about how great John Buscema was, point out his anatomy and these things. I just thought, he's talking to me. This is so great.
Right.
But I did like the art, and I started to notice, this is what John Byrne looks like. This is what Buscema looks like, and Simonson. Like, these are some of the artists that I was getting to see. And so just seeing this art, I like a lot of the Roger Stern run, but it's just looking at the art alone gives me a nostalgic feeling. And so this was one of my first exposures to the Avengers, not particularly this story, although I think he had some of these issues, but I was just flipping through any of them. And it's also funny because I used to read those Marvel handbooks, the official Marvel handbook or whatever, all the time as a kid. I love that stuff. And a lot of the art they were using on the original printings of those were from this era. And so when I think they had Absorbing Man, and there's a little piece of art that is the Wasp blasting him in the eyes, and it's John Buscema from this arc. So I kind of just associate him and this arc with what Marvel, like a golden age of Marvel, even though really the golden age of Buscema would have been late 60s, early 70s.
Right, yeah. Well,
on his original Avengers run.
Yeah, I'm kind of similar with Jim Lee in that aspect, because I came on through the X-Men cartoon, and then they had the Jim Lee trading card, the X-Men trading card set. So that art was like ingrained into my mind. So whenever I saw Jim Lee art, I'm like, oh, that's the X-Men.
Totally. I mean, even though it wasn't probably stated as the official house art style, because each character and title had that, I guess. Certainly with Jim Lee, it became just out of popularity a house style because how many artists wanted to draw like Jim Lee and maybe were even encouraged to after his success.
I'd say probably the same with Buscema at this point in time too, because he did him and Stan. I think it was him who did the How to Draw Marvel Comics the Marvel made with Stan Lee.
Yes, another gift from my cousin, the same one. Like I've read that thing and traced his Reed Richards thousands of times to just put other badly designed superhero costumes on it and everything. And because I couldn't draw a woman to save my life, I would have to do the same thing with Invisible Woman. It's funny. I was trying to look up anything Roger Stern might have to say about this story or just writing the Avengers, and sadly didn't come up with a whole lot, but he was talking about working with John Buscema at this time. And the only thing that I could take away from it was that he said he loved working with John and he thought his art was great. And it was just hard keeping him interested in superhero work. That his heart was with Conan the Barbarian. And that kind of thing, you could get him excited, but not the Avengers so much, not superhero stuff.
Wow, that's interesting considering like how much superhero work Buscema did in his career.
And how great his work is. I never feel like he's phoning it in.
Never.
It is interesting to me to look at this versus like the first appearance of the Vision. You know, I believe he drew that amongst many other classic. And there is kind of a grittiness, and this could be also Tom Palmer, but sometimes it's down to the breakdowns of like even, you know, Hercules is featured a lot in this, and he's pretty off his rocker in this in this arc. But there are times where characters are like yelling and emoting, and their eyes are kind of lopsided, and it doesn't seem like a choice. It just seems like I just kind of drew it. I don't know that he drew it and didn't care, but there's something about, I don't know, later period Buscema that I like, especially in this arc, that it feels a little rougher around the edges. Like before it was like perfect superhero anatomy art, and this feels grittier and just messed up slightly, just that little bit in a way. And so yeah, when I see like there's a cover later on where Zeus is screaming about Hercules because of what happens to him in this arc, and it's just like that kind of like mad power is what it looks like. That's what I associate with this run, and also the fact that he still draws everyone Hollywood beautiful. Like when you see the Wasp, she still looks like a 1960s glamour model. Yeah. So he's kind of frozen in time there, but I love it so much. It's so great.
So let's dive into the story here. What did you think about going back and rereading the story?
I really love it. I've read the Roger Stern issues preceding this a bit more recently as well, and not just the John Buscema stuff, but even the Al Milgrom drawn ones. Which it's funny how quickly, I don't know that Stern changed the way that he was writing between one artist and the other. I don't feel like he did. I just feel like once Buscema took over, the stories felt more serious. It was much easier to take them like they felt like they had weight. And I wonder if that has something to do with the way that they did comics back then, because they were still using the Marvel method back then. Where that's a great point.
They wrote so for anyone who doesn't know what I'm talking about here, the reason Stan Lee was able to churn out so many comics back in the day was because he wasn't writing full scripts. He was just basically given like a 1 to 2 page breakdown of an issue. He'd give it to the artist. The artist would draw 22 pages based off that, and then he would go back and he'd write in the dialogue. And that became like the Marvel style. Pretty much it was like what they were expected to do up until Joe Quesada. When Quesada came over, then they switched over to full script.
That sounds about right. I'm sure there's some small, just people who maybe didn't like. Probably if you had someone like Alan Moore writing, well, he's not writing for proper Marvel. Ever again. I'm sure there were some people who maybe didn't want to work in that way, but yeah, for the most part, I think that was true. And that's a really good point with these, because yeah, if you get back this Buscema art that just has a weight to it, then and also it's his storytelling choices. I mean, he's essentially becoming the cinematographer, director, because you're leaving all that up to them instead of writing a panel description. Right. So that makes a lot of sense. I loved thinking about how this story might get told today and how it could still be a great story, but it wouldn't have the lo-fi charm that this story does. And I don't even mean the way it was made. I think it looks great. I love this era of comics. This is like they had gotten better and better, both in art and story, but they still had a lot of the weird 60s, 70s nerdiness, self-referential stuff about it. Like, they have to fit everything into continuity. They just have to tell you why the Fantastic Four aren't here helping the Avengers. They got to talk about it. But the story itself is just it feels very modern. When Brian Michael Bendis did Disassembled, which I didn't think it was a great story. I didn't dislike that storyline until it became about the Scarlet Witch, because it felt like a weird cop-out. But when things were just happening for the first few issues, like people are dying, things are exploding, and nothing's getting explained, that felt very real to me. I've thankfully never been in a situation where I'm being assaulted and I don't even know who's behind it. But that feeling of... That's really what a supervillain, I think, would probably do. Right. Like, if they would not, make a speech and then kick your ass or whatever. They would just blow you up and then take over, and it would be a very scary thing. And this feels like that. I mean, you get a lot of the goofy. I mean, they're in surveillance vans, for God's sake. So I mean, that's the lo-fi stuff that I find very charming.
Well, one of the goofy things that jumped out to me was after they break into the mansion, they take it over, and the Black Knights come back, and then Zemo says, in his current emotional state, the Knight is too preoccupied to notice much of anything. Or Victor says that he didn't even look twice at the new gates we installed.
No, I mean, Stern is just trying to tie every bow. So, and I get it. Like I think at this point, like you still have the letters page and everything, so it's like they're on the defense covering all the details. Like, I don't want any of you kids writing in and telling us we missed this thing, no more no prices, just shut up, we covered it all. I mean, that's part of the grittiness, is that it feels very real world of its time, meaning no cell phones, no modems, no whatever. It is, people are in surveillance vans, people are just, when they disguise themselves, they just put on a trench coat and a hat, and that's very, and when Hercules, an actual Olympian god, is on death's door, they take him to a normal hospital, and doctors are trying to inject him with things, with needles. And I love it. Feels so. I keep saying charming, but that's what it feels like. It's a weird, like a big, high concept, like supervillains versus superheroes, and then it's set in this world that is warts and all pretty real. And so you end up with supervillains that are just sitting in like a flower van, outside of the Avengers mansion, and then saying things like, like doing things like making sure the Black Knight is thrown off his game because he loves the Wasp, but then Paladin showed up at a red carpet event, but then Zemo planned for that. And I think that's one thing, aside from just this is a very brutal arc. I mean, not just what happens to Hercules, Jarvis, what happens to him, and emotionally what happens to Captain America. What they try to do to everybody is they do end up grandstanding because they're still 1980s, Marvel Comics supervillains. But their plan itself put into action, Baron Zemo and the Masters of Evil, is really we're going to take them apart piece by piece, and we're going to win. That's it. Yeah. And that's why we're going to have so many, 15 people doing this, because we're just going to overwhelm them. It's not about, making the speech or making a statement other than the statement of, I'm going to best and kill my enemies. Right. And that's, I don't know. There's something, it's really affecting. It's really affecting for me to read it.
Yeah, it is. And, well, speaking with the real world thing, I love this, and I don't think this is technically part of these issues that are for the proper arc, but there's I think it might be one of the issues before. But when Captain Marvel is coming back and she goes to Paris for crepes in costume, and she just appears at the table, and the waiter's like, "Oh, Captain Marvel."
And there's that stuff. I mean, if the art looked a little different, and if there were more exclamation points, you could definitely put that in an Avengers comic from 1965. Like that's left over from the Stan Lee version of Marvel.
But what's funny? It also reminds me of that scene in Iron Man 2 when he goes to the donut shop.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Well, that is something that I also was thinking of is how this arc has kind of been played out for us on the big screen. Not exactly, but of course Zemo was in Civil War. I know he's shown up in Bucky and
Falcon and Winter Soldier.
Yes, thank you. But he was in Civil War, and even though that is also taking from Civil War and kind of other places too, the thing about Zemo in that movie was that he has planned for everything down to emotional reactions. And he is not trying to grandstand. He doesn't even care if you see his face. He just wants revenge. He wants what he thinks is justice. And a more identifiable way, relatable way than this Zemo that we have in the comic. Right. But that, I forgot that this Zemo in the comic with this plan, he has tried to plan for everything, including emotional reactions, like the Black Knight thing.
I never put that together until you said it, but you're right. His plan in Civil War is basically an update of this Under Siege plan. Like it's he doesn't have the Masters of Evil or anything like that, no. but the whole point is trying to take the Avengers apart piece by piece, and he does that
Yes.
Whereas in this one, the heroes end up winning in the end, but in that one, Zemo basically wins. That's the first time a villain had won in a Marvel movie.
Yeah, and it is, because they were doing the Civil War thing that his plan became to, instead of trying to use more force against them, it is to divide and conquer, to set them against each other, which, that is the thing. Like, even in this arc, it has that moment where all the Avengers come together and it's a ragtag team. That's something that I love about the Avengers, is that no matter how powerful they are, they can have like 12 gods on the team. They still feel like a little bit of an underdog in a lot of cases, or especially when they're coming back from a defeat. They feel scrappy, and I just love reading that. I'll show up every time for that.
I think a big part of that is just like the Marvel feel in general. Like, there's always kind of like that scrappiness that's baked into it ever since which goes back to the 60s, because it was all about, how can we make these guys flawed compared to the pristine heroes over at DC.
Yeah, and also, this lineup of the Avengers, I really do like it. Less the version that we have by the end of the arc, although that's an interesting one too. But, I love having Monica Rambeau in there. Cap, of course. Hercules is a lot of fun. It's really it's going to be interesting to see what they do with Hercules in the Marvel Universe when they get around to that, because Hercules in the comics is kind of the Chris Hemsworth Thor as he is now, but just more moody and with he's not even trying to stop partying. Like, that's just how he lives. I know that Herc has gone through changes over the years, but this version of Herc just being he's always partying, or he's sorry for something he did recently, or he's pissed off that the Wasp, a woman, is telling him what to do. Like, he's just a big 3-year-old that's just throwing a tantrum a lot of the time. And it's a lot of fun to have him around. I mean, this is a guy who really is the reason that this plan works, is because they know that if they get him drunk and then ultimately drug him, that he will cause problems, and that he's their biggest gun at this moment. Yeah,
you know what? It's funny, because when I was younger, I didn't really like Hercules that much as a character. Like, whenever I read his stories, I'm like, oh god, this guy, he's annoying. He's he's like Thor, but not as interesting. And then as I've gotten older and I'm looking back on these comics, I'm actually like, Hercules is actually a lot of fun.
I'm in love with the guy on these particular, again, because Buscema, the way that he draws him, he kind of looks like Brian Blessed. I don't know if you're familiar with that actor. He was in the Flash Gordon movie. He was just like a guy with a giant beard and a huge voice, a very Shakespearean but like melodramatic delivery of everything. But yeah, he just draws him as like a big. Every expression on his face is set to 11 at all times, like very expressive. And it's in the writing too, though, because like in the issues leading up to, I think of Under Siege like proper being 273 to 276, I guess, because 273 is when they actually get to the mansion, the Masters of Evil, and get inside and actually start making that trouble. But it's been, like many issues before.
Well, then 277, because that's the big Cap Zemo showdown.
There you go. They've been planting these villains as coming together or just being, broken out of jail or whatever for many issues prior to that. Right. They've also been sowing other seeds like Hercules. He's joined the team. He's never had the Wasp as chairperson before in the Avengers, and he keeps having thought bubbles just about who is she to tell me what to do, which I don't think he ever just says women shouldn't do that. Funny that he's coming from a, goddesses have plenty of power, but he just has a problem with that, and that actually ends up being borne out in the story, like when he's on whatever they've given him to drug him, and the Wasp bosses him around one too many times. He explodes, and that's something that they seem to know will happen. Zemo seems to know will happen.
Well, there's also speaking of that, the Epic Collection includes some promotion. A little piece from Marvel Age Annual number 2, which shows him like spying on the Avengers and and making his plan. And so yeah, that's another thing. Like even in books that weren't connected to this, they were still seeding stuff in.
And it's interesting because they talk about. They're doing the whole asterisk and then go see, the editor tells you what comic the thing happened in. But they're talking about like that they sent the West Coast Avengers on a wild goose chase about something. Right. So I'm sure that's something that happened. There's a lot of like Captain America shows up and says, yeah, I had to deal with, is it Whirlwind? Yeah. Like in my comic, and they're like, yeah, that actually happened. So we got mileage out of just this character distracting Captain America in his own comic for an issue. And then he shows up here. It's a very tight continuity. I say that, I don't know how accurate all of it is, like maybe something got missed, but as far as how much they reference all the other parts of the Marvel Universe, it's going on a lot. And they also do a lot of what feels like Jim Shooter's whole, like every comic is somebody's first.
Right.
It's really not bad. It's pretty well handled by Roger Stern, but it's like every issue you get a little bit of a catch up on who the Avengers are, each one of the members. I don't know. It's such a part of its time.
Even that too. It's because whenever I think about that, I'm always reminded of Claremont, and I love his X-Men run, but at the same time, going back and rereading those issues, like I can skip like half of these caption boxes.
Yes.
Whereas this one, it feels a lot more organic when he's doing those recaps. It doesn't feel as like
Agreed.
forced. It doesn't feel like I don't feel like I'm just wasting time by reading these captions.
I totally agree. And he has them do it like I think he has when the Wrecker from the Wrecking Crew is in disguise and drinking with Hercules and is asking him about the Avengers. I mean, who knows what character reason you would give that he does that. But Hercules talks about each member of the Avengers as he sees them, which is a bit of a character moment because he also shits on the Wasp in that moment. But you also, if you have not been reading the Avengers or you don't even know about these characters, you get a miniature biography of each one and one panel each. And that's a relatively fluid and organic way to get that information out there and give you what Shooter was going for.
Yeah, absolutely. Because, like I said, I read this with the Epic Collection, so it has all those issues in there. So if you read it all the way through, you pick up on all that stuff. But rereading it for this, I just jumped right into the Under Siege story, and you're right. It gives me a nice little recap, and I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. That's where we were at. This point in time.
There's a lot going on. I mean, some of it figures into this. Like the Submariner had joined the Avengers. I think he appears if it goes that far back in that collection, then you'll see him.
Right. Yeah.
But he joined. There's I believe that he's going after to find his wife Marina, and then also somebody wants to take him to court for the damages he caused when he tried to invade America.
Right, yeah.
with the Atlanteans, which is great. I mean, this is, again, this is when I say lo-fi, that's part of it. It's like the stuff happens in the real world. Like Hercules gets dropped off by a woman in a limo and she has given him something in his drink. This is stuff that I feel like if it's done now, and this isn't a criticism, but if you were to do the equivalent of these things now, like someone would be wearing a Mission Impossible, high-tech mask, or someone would, I don't know, shoot somebody from 50 states away, things that would feel more high-tech and imaginative and sci-fi. And this stuff it almost seems like Stern is trying to find every juncture to make it a little more grounded. Because it's the Marvel Universe. You could do anything you wanted. You could say, somebody learned a magic word and made Hercules go that way. So that it just makes it. And again, it makes it feel very Avengers because they live in a mansion. They're still in the mansion. They're not in Avengers Tower, Avengers compound. They live down the street from some people. Right. I just love that.
Which is something I always thought was kind of funny. It's like everybody gets pissed off. And Derek always used to say that too. So like everybody gets pissed off the X-Men, but the X-Men, they've got the courtesy to stay way the fuck up in upstate New York.
Yeah, that's a great point because, man, I mean, I'm sure they have some. I would hope that, Tony Stark probably bought some of the buildings around the Avengers Mansion, that they have like some kind of campus that keeps them a little bit more buffered from everyone else. But I mean, and it gets destroyed in this, and that is, it doesn't get rebuilt right away. After this, at the end of this arc, they end up going to Hydro Base, which is a place that Stingray had been operating out of, and then it's Avengers Island, and it's a while before they get back to being in the mansion,
right?
Which is like this. I understand that this arc also. I only recently read the first issue of the original Thunderbolts series in preparation for this because, like, oh yeah, I forget. That's kind of a jump from here to that. It's a lot of the same characters that are on that team that are just the Masters of Evil, and that it follows up on some threads. Like even just Moonstone is power hungry, but Zemo uses her because she is powerful.
You took the words right out of my mouth because I was thinking the whole thing. I was thinking that nonstop as I was rereading this last night. I'm like, wow, this really leads into the Thunderbolt series in a big way. You can tell that Busiek was definitely did several rereads of this story before he wrote that issue.
Well, it really, I mean, I haven't read all the Avengers comics ever, but it is such a great, iconic story, especially considering that, I mean, I love this lineup of Avengers, like I said, but it's not the most classic lineup of Avengers you'll ever see. There's no Iron Man. Thor shows up eventually in it, but it's not a Stan, it's not a Roy Thomas, it's not, an Englehart or whatever, and that shouldn't mean anything. Stern is incredible, but it is I really think this is the best thing he did, and it's something like there's something about it that you could do. You could do an animated, the way that DC will take an arc and turn it into an animated film, with the Justice League. You could do that with this and just spruce it up. And there's not. It's not that there aren't there, but like this is not a bunch of Avengers comics would necessarily clean up well, and you could make it happen, but that way, especially classic Avengers. Right.
You'd have to do a lot of rewriting here and there and snipping stuff in and inserting other stuff. But yeah, you're right. Yeah. This is a nice, and I've read a lot of those older comics, but this is a really, really nice self-contained story, and it works really well. Like and I think that's why this has been collected in so many different versions. There's so many different copies of printings of the Under Siege story floating around out there.
Yeah. And to talk about the villains aspect of it, there's a lot of villains in there, and I don't know that they all get a real spotlight, but they do get character out of each one of them at some point. And I just am so impressed, and also I find it very funny just how nasty the villains are portrayed in this. And Zemo, of course, he's a schemer, but the Wrecking Crew is just a bunch of, I guess, what they were construction workers. Is that accurate? Is that their origin?
So, yeah.
And of course, at this point, they're hardened criminals, but all they want to do in the Avengers mansion is bust up walls and people's spaces looking for loot and laughing. That's all their whole motivation. Like Zemo has this whole thing, you killed my father, whatever. Moonstone clearly has is a sociopath, it seems like, and just wants control over people. Pretty much everybody else on the team, maybe minus Absorbing Man and Titania, because they have their own thing going on, is just like, I'm an asshole and I just want to be shitty to the Avengers. But the brutality with which they do it, and Mr. Hyde is really the standout, with which they do it, and then the way that Buscema draws them, they all look like ogres, because you got a lot of strong men, and they're just drawn ugly, and the way that they do these things, you feel cruelty coming off the page.
Right.
Especially Mr. Hyde, who I've not really read him in anything but this story. I know he was a Daredevil character originally, and he's just basically his origin is I'm that guy but modern.
Right. Yeah.
His thing, but in this, he seems so bloodthirsty at every moment. He wants there to be conflict, and then he is the one that beats Jarvis almost to death. The innocent, like the heart, the mascot of the Avengers. The man who has only ever served and had good in his heart. And a lot of that happens off panel, but they keep doing the "aye" sound effect. It's haunting to me because he takes such joy in it. And I'm probably reading too much into it, but I mean, because Mr. Hyde is just really a sadist, I guess. But he's beating up one of the most calm and demure men in the world, someone you might see as weak, and he is Mr. Hyde. Essentially. So that he is beating up what would be the opposite of him, his alter ego, is interesting to me. That you have the guy, at least in literature, the character who like hates his alter ego, who he sees as weak and too human and all these things, that he is taking out all that stuff potentially, at least has symbolic meaning to me.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
But I really don't. I mean, who knows if Stern even cared about that? But it makes what he's doing have a little more charge that he's doing that. And then there's, of course, they don't have, back in these days, they didn't have a lot of silent panels without dialogue. You didn't waste we didn't do that. It's just not common. But there are a few in this story, and one of them is when Hercules, who is still drugged, and basically like he's in a bar fight with every villain that they have, and they start knocking him around, and he falls on the ground and is clearly unconscious. And then they pull out a little bit, and you see like 10 of these guys beat him. And you don't even see him. You just see them descend on him. And that could look like a funny, like, schoolyard fight. But probably, again, because of Buscema, it feels wrong. Like, when I see violence on, like, Twitter or whatever, I have a reaction of, oh, God, this shouldn't be happening. I don't want to see this. I actually have that feeling a little bit in that moment, because they're just going to beat him to a pulp, and they almost kill him.
Yeah. And God, what Zemo does to Cap too is just like, and I think I love about it is how Cap won't break while Zemo's there, right? He's holding it back until that and I'm reading, and as I'm rereading this, because your memory is not quite as fresh so I'm rereading this, and I'm like, wait, wasn't he affected more? Is there more to this scene? And then when we get to the end, I'm like, oh, now I remember. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he starts ripping. I mean, it's great because basically all of this is because of Captain America more than the Avengers.
Right.
I mean, of course, Zemo and the Masters of Evil had prior dealt with the Avengers, but this is about like Zemo hates Captain America for these things, and therefore the Avengers are the thing most associated with Captain America minus his shield, I guess. Mm-hmm. So this is revenge right here. Everybody is being tortured and killed or trying to be killed, destroyed before Cap is ever injured. They're not. Right. He gets to be witness to his world falling apart, and then of course you pull out these pictures of his mom, Bucky, his last pictures. This is before you couldn't do that. Now he would have to be deleting a hard drive or something.
Right.
Yeah, but ripping up these photos for this man who
just imagine Zemo asked Zemo said, "What's your iCloud password?"
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to delete your whole cloud. Like doing that, and I think he's having Mr. Hyde do it in front of him sometimes too, but and Mr. Hyde of course crushes his original triangular shield,
right? Yeah,
which that's all working on symbolism as well. And then, but yeah, just the emotional. I'm reminded at the end of it, and it's easier for me to remember it when Chris Evans is playing him because he is younger, and I saw him for longer as a young, Steve Rogers before he became Captain America. I forget who Steve Rogers is all the time, where he came from. He may be a soldier. He is like, such an iron will person, but he is a boy who grew up in New York and had a family and had a connection to this world and then kind of became a living symbol.
But more than that, too, I think a lot of people make this mistake they make two mistakes about Cap. And I think the Ultimates did this terribly, which is the whole idea of like, they write him as like the typical 1930s alpha male. When you actually look at Steve Rogers' background, I mean, he was an art student. Like that's what he was doing. He was he was a New Deal Democrat. He was, he was an art student. He was living in New York at the time. He was, he was part of that whole crowd. So he wouldn't be like the typical 1930s alpha male soldier type. He would he was in fact that's one of the reasons why he was chosen. I think the first movie does a good job of showing this, even though they don't lean into the art stuff. But the fact that he is so different, just in personality, not only physical ability, from the other soldiers.
He would have been, hopefully, given the opportunity, a great asset and a great, person, whether it's on a local level or a national level, had he even never become Captain America, I would like to think. Yeah. Just because he would want to go do good things and he would do anything to make a better world, a better country, however you want to put it. So yeah, that would be the reason you pick that man, because he doesn't resort to violence as first. He doesn't think, oh, this guy does this, how about I punch him in the face? That's the only solution here. As good as he is at that, and we love to watch him do it. But yeah, I also tend to think of Captain America as perpetual, and of course, as I get nearer to 40, it's like I can't think of all of these characters as older than me all the time, because eventually they will have to be younger than me. Because like Batman is at oldest my age, I think, is typically how Batman.
Well, that's why Frank Miller did Dark Knight Returns, because he realized like I'm older than Batman. This is not right.
That's right. So it's like at some point I'm gonna be like, oh man, Captain America's younger than me, at least physically. But I still tend to think of Cap because of the way he's kind of the daddy of of Marvel, and certainly of the Avengers team and the Marvel comics. Because I think of him as that, I forget about his humanity sometimes, not his compassion, but just this thing. And so even though there's a part of me that feels like it's just how stories were told at the time, him crying at the end of the arc about those things is certainly not out of character or anything. I don't have a solution for how I wish it would have been handled differently. It's not about him crying. It's just it felt, I know what it was. I think I would have felt better about it had he had Thor and Wasp there. Not because he couldn't do this for Monica, because they have a bond. I mean, she's been on the team for a while, but it seems like something that he would allow to happen with those people there to support him. Or I wish that they were there to support him, and maybe there was a reason that Stern wanted it just to be Monica and him. But since
if I recall, Wasp, like I think Monica was kind of like his pet character, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's probably a big reason for it too.
Sure. And it's not a bad scene because
no, not at all.
The thing I'm calling for, but I think I was like, what would make this emotionally more and dramatically correct for me? Mm-hmm. And it would be that the Avengers are backing up Captain America in that moment, the same way that he kind of is their backbone a lot of the time, versus one person representing the Avengers in that moment. Yeah. But it is, I think it's great that Stern, and Buscema probably made the choice too. Here's 2 pages of Captain America crying and talking to a person about his feelings about what just happened to finish this whole big arc.
Well, something else too, and I think this is another reason why, and it has to do with the way Cap's usually depicted. And it's another mistake that I feel that Chris Evans has managed to correct. But when people, for the longest time, not only readers, but even the writers, they would, they had this image of Cap that because he's a man out of time, because he's from the 1930s, they think of him, they write him as if he's a grandpa, right? Mm-hmm. There's this whole tendency to write him as if he's, he's as if he's literally, 70 to 100 years old. Right. When he's a young guy who just got plucked out of time. So he's still a young guy. And I think that's something that a lot of, I think a lot of writers get so hung up on the legend aspect of it, and
for sure,
and so they write him like that. And I think Chris Evans has really done a great service to the character by showing him as a young guy, like as a sensitive guy, and really kind of dismissed a lot of those myths about the character.
I agree. I mean, I love his portrayal of Cap, and I think, that's one of the most. It's like a Christopher Reeve's, like Superman thing, where it's just like, okay, you just found a person who was this person somehow and threw him in the suit. I will say that the Captain, or in the comics, one thing that they're saddled with is that this Captain America, and who cares the exact number of years because it's a sliding time scale, but when I think of Captain America in the comics, he has been here for a while now. Right. And that doesn't really mean anything about his age so much as he's been through Operation Galactic Storm, all these, Kang the Conqueror, all these many things. And so he is a more seasoned person, and that lends toward the legend and toward him feeling older, but doesn't mean that's how he should be written. That doesn't mean he has to change. I don't mean that that's how it should be, but I think it's a lot easier to think of him like you're the guy like punched Thanos in the face that one time or whatever, so you're now a legend. And it is, I will also point out, it's not a big hang up for me, but if you tried to do this arc, the Under Siege arc, in, let's say, the MCU, a version of that, you really did try to translate it. One interesting thing is that, Cap in the comics is essentially, kind of a Batman. Like, he's a physical peak human. He is not a superhuman. And so in the movies, they clearly went with, okay, he's gonna, he can take punches from Thanos. He can punch someone in the face and their head could come off, sort of thing. And that's kind of an Ultimates thing. And I'm not going to complain, because that just means that you can use him more realistically in the movies instead of having to find ways for him to throw his shield at everybody.
I think I think the comics have also, not only the Ultimates, but just over time.
They started to,
they've started to.
At this point, they don't. Of course, the comics always, it's whatever you need in the moment with a character like that. But in this, he is very vulnerable, because he is, at the end of the day, just a really great Olympic level athlete with incredible tactics. He's an incredible superhero, but he is just a man. And so that they're going to break him down, and that he doesn't get broken down, and that he is the one that at the end is one-on-one with Zemo, who is also just a man. He's kind of his flip. That makes the story more special to me than if it was a Superman, or a Cap that felt like a Superman, or closer to that, where it's like, well, here's a guy who has powers that, we had to nullify his powers or something. It just feels like a person I can relate to even more, because he's just saying, I don't care what happens to me. I'm just a guy, and I gotta see this through. And it's funny with the Zemo fight at the end. I like it because Cap is just like, you can imagine it cinematically, like these punches, these shield throws on this roof are probably slow, and there's a lot of talking between, because he doesn't really need to overpower Zemo. Like, Zemo's good at what he does, but Cap is just, at this point, has the high ground. That feels like almost like a Clint Eastwood moment.
Well, this is also another connection that I think Civil War took some influence, because just like in Civil War, you go from that big epic superhero throwdown in the airport, But when it gets down to the end, it's a much more personal battle between these two characters.
And that was so smart and right of them to do that.
Oh, yeah.
Especially after that battle, which was fun at first. And then for me, whatever. It was fun. But the actual fight where it's like, okay, Iron Man and Captain America are having a fist fight. They are just fighting each other. And I guess Bucky's there too. That matters. That feels, and it is a cool thing when you have a team. We don't really see the Avengers come together as a team unit, at least doing a lot of battling together in this arc. And you don't have to have that to have a good Avengers story anyway. But the things that feel, the Avengers are a very personal team versus Justice League. Justice League has enemies, but the Avengers have like sworn villains that say, I will kill each Avenger. Some of them at least are like this. And Zemo is a perfect example. And so to have these battles where it's like about what each of you represents and it comes down to one-on-one battle like this, it feels right. And of course, again, because it was kind of all about Cap in the first place.
Right.
And then, of course, they do this thing where it's like, we have to establish that Cap tried to save him. But Zemo was such a villain, he would not be saved by Captain America, and then seemingly died, and obviously didn't. But it's such a funny, it feels like a Saturday morning cartoon thing where it's like, we can't have Cap knock him off the roof, he just has to fall off the roof.
Yeah.
Or a Batman Begins type of thing, I guess, too.
Right, I'm not going to kill you, but I don't have to save you, which is such a cop-out.
A little bit of that. But then, and then even Cap is like trying to hold his hand out, like, I will save you right now, and Zemo's like, no, I'm too evil, and then just falls off the thing. There's... I like the Black Knight in this run. He's an interesting character to throw in. It feels like he's a Hawkeye, not, like analog, but kind of like he's filling a role of here's another human who's a weapon-based, he's less smarm and more science, I guess, than Hawkeye. But he's filling just kind of I don't want to say he's filling space on the team. I mean, in the arc, he gets knocked out pretty early and then is out for most of that time. And then,
I didn't like him in this arc because, he's just like, he's such a little whiner.
He really is. Well, because they have this, they've been building this relationship between him and the Wasp, who is relatively newly single, not really newly, but like, who knows, in the comics it feels newly because she was with Hank Pym for so long, that they want to put him with her, or at least have this romantic tension between the two of them. And then he goes to a red carpet with her, and then another guy shows up, Paladin, who is like way more of a baller than him. I'm sorry, Black Knight. Like, he's a cool dude. He wears a mask. I don't even know who he is. He's the bad boy, and Wasp digs him. And Dane doesn't like that's a character that I've just never read something where he's a cool idea to me, and he feels Avengers-y, but I've never been excited by a story that featured him, or he wasn't the exciting part of it. So that he got knocked out and taken out of the whole thing early, I guess, made the most sense to me. It's
also weird because I'm reading this story with him, like, going all gaga over the Wasp, and I'm reminded of what happens later when he's got that whole thing going with Crystal, and I'm just like, what is with the Black Knight, man?
And Cersei, man, he's a horny guy, I guess.
Yeah.
He gets he gets attached really fast, because also there's with Cersei and then Crystal, and then it's like, I was reading those 90s issues recently, I'm like, there's a lot of passionate kisses. It feels very soap opera-ish, that era. But I guess that's just kind of, he's a romantic guy, I guess.
I guess so, yeah. I mean, I like how they did it in Eternals. It was like one of the few things. I didn't like a whole lot about Eternals. I thought it was mostly kind of just kind of there. It wasn't bad, but it just didn't grab my attention. But I did like Kit Harington's portrayal of Dane in that. Yeah,
I mean, frankly, I would have been way more interested in just like a Black Knight movie than what we ultimately got. And then how he just kind of appears at the beginning, disappears for most of the movie, then has a revelation at the end that would only make sense to a Marvel Comics reader. Was like,
and then we get Blade's voiceover.
Yeah, I'm like, and then I have to look up who that even, I'm hearing, because I'm like, it just felt like a weird, I don't know. That one was not as well calculated as some of their, post-credit scenes or whatever they might be. But they also pull in some other, members to take over for the fallen Avengers in this, because it's like, essentially Wasp says, I've tried to contact everybody. She doesn't get drawn into this whole thing right away. She says, somebody says at some point that they called the Fantastic Four, and that their message Service told them they were on a secret mission. So you could call the Baxter Building and say, hey, it's me, Reed. Just want to let you know we're on a secret mission. We'll get back to you as soon as possible.
They did a bunch of that back in this time.
I know.
I mean, there's this one. I remember there was a Spider-Man X Factor crossover miniseries, and it's like these supervillains are in town and Spider-Man needs help. So Peter Parker, he puts in a call to answering services, and
Yes.
it's like the Avengers, they're out of town. The Fantastic Four, they're off world, and it's like, well, I guess. Do you have X Factor's number by any chance?
Well, that's a good bit. That's really great. It's like, okay, I know where the Defenders are, but I don't even think they have a line. So, well. So they and again, this is like Stern feels like a thing where it's like you got to button up all of these potential, like you can't have help yet because we got to have the dark before the light. But at some point, someone also is listing off some other people that can't make it for some reason, and they say, this person's doing the. Oh, well, they say that Scarlet Witch.
She also says we should try and let's scour the city, see if we can find Spider-Man and Daredevil.
Yeah, to see if they're about. They say that Scarlet Witch and Vision are on vacation, as though that's a reason not to call them. Like, I love that. Like, it's like, hey, technically they're out of office until the 4th, so just
also it's a sign of the times too, because if they're like out on the beach or something, they're not going to.
You can't get to them.
You can't get to them.
You don't have a telepath on the team. But the last one they hit, and it's like, did you do this as a joke, Stern? Was that they said, I tried to call the Falcon, but he's down with the flu. Like, you really want to do Sam Wilson like that he wouldn't show up with the flu? He wouldn't show up to help Cap, of all people, with the flu? I just thought that's such a funny, like, it seems like a placeholder, or like you're going to make me explain this, Jim Shooter? Fine, I'll put this down. But again, I keep saying lo-fi, but that stuff is what makes it feel lo-fi and like a club, which is kind of what the Avengers are. They're just like a club of people that happen to enjoy saving the world. That's their thing. But
I do love that they brought in Scott Lang. Like, I think
that was great.
Yeah, I love Scott, so I thought that was a great touch, and I forgot he was in this.
It's easy to forget because he's not featured prominently on any of the covers, for instance.
Right.
But the art.
Right. Well, even that big famous cover. I mean, it's got Dr. Druid on there, but it doesn't have Batman.
Well, he's a more striking figure, I guess, with his bald head and everything. But it's an interestingly structured arc because it's not, even though it is. Again, it feels more modern because it is kind of a like. There's a beginning and an end to this thing. It feels less like a soap opera than some of the other stuff that was going on at the time, where it flowed into and out of other stories. But this arc has a couple issues where things happen. Then you follow mostly the Wasp and then Ant-Man in a hospital where Hercules has been beaten pretty much to death, to the point where his heart is beating once every 10 minutes, I believe they say. Which I love, because it's like, it is kind of like, whether you want to think of him as magic or an alien that happens to be called Hercules or whatever, here's an explanation for, like, it's kind of a scientific explanation of, like, that's just how his body would handle almost being at death's door.
Right.
Would be doing that. But then you have Wasp and Scott Lang coming together, and they have to fight Absorbing Man and Titania, and that's like a whole issue, almost like a break from everything else. And you have the two shrinking heroes who, as heroic as they are, they're up against two of the heaviest hitters and take them down.
Right.
And it's a really cool, like, it is... now that I'm thinking of it, because there's one thing I didn't love about this arc, and it was just how Stern treated Wasp with a lot of respect and made her chairperson, all these things. And it is funny because you can easily play her as a Karen, basically. Like, she has big Karen energy. That's kind of why she makes a good leader sometimes, is because she'll just say, hey, this is how I want it done. But obviously she has more depth than that. But she pretty quickly goes into despair over Hercules, and she should have an emotional reaction, but she kind of gives up, and it's almost like she needs Scott Lang to talk her into not being in despair.
Right.
I wanted... Strong people have moments of doubt all the time. That's just the truth. But I almost was like, just don't even give her that. Like, let her be worried and then get angry and get over it, because it felt a little bit like, oh, woe is me, Wasp from 1975, not 1965.
Something else I thought was interesting here is we get almost every single one of Hank Pym's successors in this story.
That's a good point.
I mean, we get Scott Lang as Ant-Man, we get Rita Damara as Yellow Jacket, we get Eric Jostin as Goliath and the Master of Evil. The only one we don't get is Bill Foster, basically, but we get everybody else.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, because when you think about it, whose DNA is the most in the Avengers history? Obviously, there's a lot of people there, but who has like the most little touchstones around the thing? It might be Pym. Like he has the most legacy characters attached to him, and you could include Wasp in that. And then I guess, you know, his daughter Nadia Van Dyne that they introduced, like that's one. You know, it's far reaching, right there.
Well, then you get Eric O'Grady is the irredeemable Ant-Man too. You get him in there. Right. But also even Ultron, right? That came from Hank Pym.
I was going to say. And then ultimately the Vision.
Right, the Vision.
Yeah. There's a lot. Well, that's why I don't really complain about how they just did what they made a choice with how they would do that in the MCU that ultimately worked in their to their benefit. But it is interesting how different it is from this character who has been such a center point, even when he's not there, of the Avengers world for the longest time.
Well, it's also interesting because they're only the only two members of the founding team who don't get represented in some way in this arc are obviously Hulk, but also but he's been pretty much written out of the book for a long period by this time. His presence, but also Iron Man. He's got like there's like one line that the Fixer makes about, you know, Tony Stark's engineering skills, and that's it.
When I was reading up or trying to find stuff Stern would say about his run, it came up a couple times. They would ask him like, what was the hardest thing about writing the Avengers? Was it coming up with threats? And he was like, not really. They have enemies, and I could also just put an army of people together to fight them, and that's what he did in this arc.
Right.
He said the hardest thing was keeping my team together because I really wanted to write, you know, Captain America, Thor, and Iron Man as part of the team, but Thor and Iron Man weren't available to me a lot of the time, and I was having to fight to hold on to my characters that I did have, because they would get, like he mentioned, someone being written off into a miniseries. I'm going to bet that's Hawkeye or something, you know. So like when he's writing a book like that, it is. I think now we worry way less about, well, they're busy in their book. Like, that hasn't been a thing in a while.
Wolverine was on like 5 different teams at one point?
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing that's like, would you rather sell more books and have the right characters in the right books, or have to write in the reason they can be in 2 places at once? You know, that's not fun. So, but it does make for an interesting team, because how would it play out differently? Would it feel like the Avengers maybe could lose, or would it be realistic for them to lose this bad at first if you had Iron Man, if you had Thor there from the start? And I don't remember what was going on with Thor. I guess this was during his the Simonson run, maybe, but I think so,
yeah, because
beard.
It's I love Thor with the beard. But also, there's the little editorial footnote. This takes place between pages 4 and 7.
That's right. I forgot. I had something in my head, like I think there's something crazy like that. Thor shows up, and Buscema just always draws like any of the gods. Just they feel like gods. But Thor, between the way he's written and drawn, whatever was going on with him in his book, it must have been something like that was a bummer, because you feel sadness from this character, and he doesn't say a lot. He has a thought bubble that says like, just grit your teeth and act like everything's okay, essentially, is one of the things he thinks. But not remembering what was going on with Thor at the time, I feel like they did an incredible job of giving us a Thor that shows up and does Thor stuff, but is not bombastic in the least. He is just like a stoic figure, and it feels emotionally, it feels visceral on the page to me. And so it's an interesting, like, it also matches what's happening in the story, because I mean, this is a terrible thing. They don't throw a party at the end of this, you know. Hercules is still in the hospital. It leads into another arc later on where Zeus is pissed off at the Avengers for getting their son into trouble. But like, it's so yeah, I really, once he does show up, it was an interest. I haven't seen a take of comic book Thor like that very often. But you mentioned Dr. Druid.
Yeah. I do not like.
Interesting choice.
Yeah, I do not like Dr. Druid. Speaking of, you know, scraping the bottom of the barrel for characters to put on the Avengers.
Yeah, I was looking it up because I was like, well, why? Because he mentioned something in the book about, you know, owing the Avengers something, and I didn't absorb the details, but you know, he had appeared in the Avengers at some point before this. I don't think it was recently. It might have been during Stern's run. I don't know. But they were kind of paying off, I guess, something that at least him doing something for him before, or something that he slighted them or something. So there's that. But yeah, it is one of these these, like, when you pull in a character, you know, you and I both probably have read these and maybe written them before, where you just are like, I want this character here. They're the kind of guy that would hear about this and show up. And so that's what he becomes. It's like, well, I had a psychic vision of the Ebon Blade, so I'm going to show up and pay back the Avengers. And he just walks out of this place. Like, no one knows who this guy is. They shouldn't even.
He doesn't even really do much.
No, I mean, his goal, or his, I guess, he is a psychic, which you don't have on the Avengers very much. You know, you don't, like, you have Moondragon. I mean, I guess telekinesis with Justice later on with Vance, but, like, you don't have telepathy on the team very much, which is kind of an interesting thing. Maybe that makes it feel too X-Men, but that's kind of what he brings to the table amongst his other skills, is that he can communicate with Blackout, who is apparently just insane villain that they're using, who uses the Dark Force, which as a kid I loved the Dark Force. Any character who had the Dark Force was like the coolest character to me. But that Moonstone has hypnotized or brainwashed that character Blackout into covering the Avengers Mansion in this Dark Force cube that makes the impenetrable. But like that, his only role is to undo or to break his mind free, and no other Avenger present, or maybe ever, minus Moondragon, could fill that role. So Stern just had to reach for this guy, and then he's on the team for a while afterwards. Yeah. I mean, he has an arc where he is, I guess, Ravonna, I think, is, you know, who is in the Loki miniseries. The comic version of her, like, influences his mind so that he kind of becomes evil and influences the Avengers and takes over as chairman and all this shit. I mean, it's a weird character to give that much juice to. And then later Ellis turns him into, like, an actual druid or something like that. Yeah, and he gets evil again. A guy can't keep evil influences out of his brain. But yeah, he just shows up and then it takes care of Blackout and then is knocked out, I believe. Pretty much. So there you go. But yeah, it was a weird, it's a weird seeing him in this. It reminds me too of, like, when they had Gilgamesh on the team too. It's like, okay, this just feels like so out of place right now. That there's this line, and I don't know if maybe sometimes writers were trying to. There is a legacy, a tradition in the Avengers of unexpected membership joins, you know, like and sometimes it really works, and you didn't think that this was a good fit, and then they are, or they're a new character, and you're like, who is this new person they're trying to shoehorn into the team, and then they end up being, I mean, the Vision, you know, he's a new character, and but the further you go in the comic series, the more often it just doesn't work. And this feels like I'm going to put this character from Marvel continuity onto this team, and it's going to be an unexpected thing, but that's going to be an extra special spice, and it's just... The biggest example of that was, like, the Sentry for me, when it's just like they put him and it's like, I think Bendis, after he put him on the team, he realized, oh wow, this guy is way too powerful and I don't know what to do with him now. Do you want to have Superman problems every issue? Because your other characters are Spider-Woman, who I love, but is like a street level character essentially. Spider-Man that was a weird... well, because he was a bit going for, he said, like, a Justice League approach, not like a one-to-one, this character is this character, but he was like the biggest characters, but also this character from a miniseries before that, you know, only some people read, I guess. I mean, when he said that, I thought it was kind of weird, because it's like, okay, you have Cap, Iron Man, Spider-Man, and Wolverine, but then you've got Luke Cage and Spider-Woman, who aren't exactly big-name characters as much as I love them. And those are actually, I mean, of that team, those two are the ones that I enjoy the most as Avengers. Like, I think Spider-Woman is a great fit, and I think Luke Cage, I think he maybe is best served elsewhere, but him on the Avengers felt good. I liked the idea, the line of... I like the idea of telling my little girl that I was an Avenger when she grows up is a great character defining, like, okay, that's a great reason to be here. It also implies that you want to make a better world for your child. So I can totally believe that. But he's just an addition that you don't really get to see what he will bring to the team, whatever he does in this arc. He just kind of shows up. But you also get, like, Photon or Monica Rambeau. I always thought it was Rambeau, because I thought it was like or Rambeau. Like, you put the emphasis on that because she's from Louisiana. But they say Rambeau in the TV show. Like, I really love her, and Stern obviously loves her too. But, like, he takes her off the playing board for most of this arc. Well, I mean, you kind of, Dark Force world. Both her and Hercules, you kind of do for this story to work, because otherwise they're too powerful. Well, and you would have the most plan for them because they are the most powerful, for sure. Like, you would know exactly how you're going to take them out. But when she comes, it's interesting. I feel like similar to, I mean, I don't think they ever were trying to make Cap, like, struggle with, will I kill Baron Zemo or not? Because I don't think that was the thing. But that same way that ending felt to me like, you want Zemo to kind of die, and you want Cap to not look like a bad guy, but this guy's going to die in front of him. When Photon comes back, she's pissed, and she chases Moonstone on this flight, you know, and like they're just going so fast.
Oh, she's pretty brutal with Moonstone, yeah.
And she is, but she's not like, she doesn't lose it, I would say. And certainly she's not in a berserker rage like Wolverine style. But then Moonstone basically just flies into a mountain and like breaks her neck, not in a way that ultimately they're like, she's fine later. But they try to make a moment out of it, like Monica is just like, oh man, I'm so vengeful right now. And I like this idea that the Avengers would be a little off their game as far as restraint goes after something like this. But the thing is, they didn't want to take it the full, I don't mean kill her, but they didn't want to make it that she, enraged, did something to Moonstone.
Right.
And probably better for her arc in the long run not to, but it's like they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. She's not a bad guy, but this person happened to break their neck, so now she's questioning, did I get too mad?
Yeah. Another thing that struck me is there's all this, bitching and moaning about whenever female characters take over male heroes. Yeah. And we had two examples of that here. We had Yellow Jacket and Captain Marvel, and nobody bitched about that at the time. So I thought that was kind of funny.
No, that's the thing. I mean, well, so much different,
well, actually, technically three, because Moonstone as well.
Yeah. Well, in Moonstone, I'm familiar with her more in the modern Marvel universe as very much a plotter, as very much like I would be a serial killer in another world. It seems like that would kind of be her thing. But I think having read a few issues of her appearances previous to this feels like where she becomes that person, right? Because she is being demeaned by Zemo, is plotting against him constantly, doesn't want anyone. Like, everyone else is pretty much okay being a lackey. She is not okay with that.
Oh yeah, I mean this book is so obviously the parent of the Thunderbolts. You don't get to the Thunderbolts without this story arc. Yeah, for sure. But I like that it's not even that the villains have problems with each other that takes the team out. That's not what really loses them this battle. The Avengers ultimately lose them the battle, which is nice because it is. If it had been that, well, Moonstone, killed Zemo and then the whole thing fell apart, then where's the heroism of the Avengers in that? Right. Like, they don't make it about that, but they do have all of these villains. Like, there's a bunch of fucking knuckleheads in this team. Like, so they're just almost going to fight with each other, but they don't let that become the story. They stay on, which is scarier than, a bunch of bruisers. Yeah. Another thing I wanted to mention, and this also ties it to Thunderbolts. Did you ever read Nisiesa's New Thunderbolts run, like around the Civil War era?
No, I didn't.
So there was a follow-up to the Cap Zemo thing in that, because in Nisiesa's run, Zemo had kind of gone through a redemption of sorts. I mean, he was still
as Citizen V, is that right?
Not as Citizen V. That actually came earlier, but because he was still Zemo all throughout the Citizen V stuff. But when he came back, he had gone through like a reformation of sorts as Baron Zemo, and when he had taken control of the Thunderbolts again. It was kind of more like a Doctor Doom type of approach. Like, he's like, okay, I want to save the world, but the only way I can save the world is if I'm the one who's controlling it, basically. Right. So it was still very, very kind of like fascist, but like fascist with good intentions type of thing. Yeah. Which interesting. Which they kind of picked up, which I think the MCU version definitely seems influenced by the whole good intentions idea. Yeah. And it made him a much more interesting character too, because it gave him a lot more depth. He's very kind of one-dimensional up until that point, yeah. That's
what I was going to say, at least in I haven't read much Thunderbolts, but him in this, I don't mind so much because there's so many villains, and that it's strong enough for him to be like, you killed my father, who was the other Baron Zemo.
Right, the Princess Bride motivation.
Yeah, exactly. And that, I mean, it's like, whatever, man, I'll accept that you're just kind of an evil dude, that evil is your legacy. I mean, not even evil, but like, I mean, I don't know what he believes in this arc, other than revenge, familial revenge, for that matter. but it's enough. And that also you're so distracted by that costume because, man, what a wild character design. Like tufts of hair on the shoulders. I love it. I think it's great. But like he's really not even the star of the villains, you know, I mean, and not to take away from what he ultimately did, but the ones that stand out, you know, the MVPs, just his interest are definitely Mr. Hyde for just the pure savagery that he like. It's so mean spirited. I mean, that's putting it lightly. And then Moonstone for her just plotting, you can feel, knowing what she turns into later, you feel someone turning more and more into just something that's going to be dangerous later. I also think it's funny that Yellow Jacket just gives up on the Masters of Evil.
Right, it's just like, you know what, I'm beat, I'm done, forget this.
She barely...
Well, I mean, she also kind of had this thing where she's going through and she's like, she definitely feels like a character who's just kind of like, shit, I kind of got wrapped up in this, I really don't want to be here.
I mean, she's funny in the arc, but like the role that she plays could have been played by another character they already have, I feel like. And she had appeared in a Stern issue, however many issues prior, so that was tying in some of that. But like, she doesn't do a lot in it, and then she starts questioning just how brutal they're being, and clearly and they set it up almost like she's going to turn on them and maybe help the Avengers, and then she just doesn't. And then at the end, when Captain America confronts her, she's like, I give up. You don't even have to arrest me.
That was the funny thing, because when I was rereading, I forgot about that she was even in this story. But when I was rereading it, and there's that buildup, and I'm like, oh wait, does she betray the Zemo? Is this when her heroic turn happens? And I kept thinking about that in my mind, and then it gets to the end, I'm like, oh wait, I guess not. Okay.
No, and I could have, and not because I want it to be on the villain's side to defeat the villains, but if she had seen what was, I mean, I would have loved to have seen her affected very directly by what is happening to Captain America and Jarvis. That she sees that, and that is a turning point for her. And then, you know, the next page, she drops a key in front of Captain America or something like that, where it's just like, or whatever would get him out of his situation.
Right.
Where it's like, I can't do this.
Yeah, the story seems to set up an are we the baddies moment, and it never comes.
Yeah, and then it's a funny scene where she just says, you don't got to tell me twice.
She just takes on down and she's like, fuck it, I'm done.
Yeah, exactly. And so it's a weird thing. You wonder, or I wonder in situations like that, I mean, knowing how they, you know, when you're writing a monthly comic and how they were, I know that Stern worked pretty far ahead. He said he had to scrap a bunch of stuff one time because of something that happened with West Coast Avengers. Like, he had to lose scripts because he was too far ahead. Yeah. But, like, I wonder if sometimes there's a reason behind the scenes where it's like, yeah, I was setting that up, and then Jim Shooter told me I couldn't do that, or whatever it might be. You know, who knows some of the reasons that these things happen, or you just change your mind at the moment. You're like, I don't know, last month I felt like that was true, but this month,
right,
whatever.
Also, just to pick up what I was saying before, the Thunderbolts thing. So after Zemo goes through his like reformation of sorts, he makes peace with Captain America, and at this point he's gotten control of 2 Moonstones, and so it allows him to kind of like, you know, warp time in a sense kind of way. So what he does is he goes back in time and he saves the Foot Locker and he brings it back and he gives it to Captain America.
Oh man, well it's funny because on one hand, like and in a great way, what a nerd love letter that is. He would do that. Like the respect for the truth of the reality that they live in. That's something that, and obviously something that, I mean, obviously because he wrote the Thunderbolts, that he cares about that story. That's a story that affected him and probably a lot of Avengers readers at the time. And that's also like, I don't know, that kind of thing will really touch me when someone admits that they're wrong and that they will do something like that. That's cool. That's a really cool thing to hear.
That was in during the Civil War era of the new Thunderbolt. So if you ever track down like basically all of the Thunderbolt stuff except for the weird Fight Club era and the Daniel Way stuff, all of it's pretty solid. So
I've been on Marvel Unlimited. That's how I was reading this arc, just going through things that I've missed over the years. And so I did read the first Thunderbolts issue. I was like, oh, it's so fun to go back and read like a mid-90s book. You know, I guess it's immediately post-Onslaught. That's part of the whole setup of the thing. But it's like Mark Bagley. I love Mark Bagley still, but like him still kind of when he was at, in my mind, the height of his game. Just kind of being a Spidey artist and then jumping onto this. And then Kurt Kurt Busiek before he was doing Avengers.
Right.
Like him, high quality writer, getting to write. It's an interesting time to be writing a comic book, it seems like.
Oh,
Because
yeah.
it's somewhere between where we got with Quesada and where we had been with Shooter, which I know I'm jumping over other editors, but these are kind of like the two feelings that I have reading it. And I just started that, and it is, I wish that I could read that first issue not knowing how it turns out.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I still appreciate what they did very much.
I remember reading the
with that
first
reveal.
issue because the big secret thing was billed on that cover, and unfortunately, it was what they should have mentioned. Like, if you're if you're really
Yep.
deep in Avengers lore, because I remember
Yes.
reading the first issue, I'm like, who are these guys?
Right. Like if it had been like they're secretly all X-Men and it's like Cyclops underneath something, then it's like, oh, cool. This is
Yeah,
great.
then I would
but I wouldn't have
gotten it. Yeah,
No, I would have picked up on like why this should matter to me, but
Yeah.
it does not matter to me ultimately. No,
yeah.
these are
The issue
characters-
did a good, and that's one of the good things that the issue does is it makes the reveal dramatic enough, and you're like, okay, I do feel this is supposed to be important. I just don't know who any of these guys are.
Right. I want to keep reading on that because there's just a lot of content there to catch up on that I understand is good, and it's happening at a time that I was also, at least a little bit later, reading Avengers and enjoying that a lot, and I know that there's some crossover there. So, Busiek, yeah, I'm a big fan of his. I really liked Astro City a whole lot. So,
Oh, really?
Yeah. I don't know how to find. It doesn't seem like it's online, but I want to go back.
Oh,
and read it.
they are available in trades. I think.
Yeah.
I think Image has the rights to it now.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So they are in trades. Like I got some when they were still with DC, I think, and but I think Image now has them now, and it looks like they're printing them in a much more digestible fashion. So
Yeah. Well, that's good because it was kind of. I had the first three, and then I'm like, what else? Well, there's got to be more stories than this.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
a long time ago. So
I mean, he's still doing it. I think.
I think you might be right.
Yeah.
I mean, which is incredible if he is. This. When I think of Marvel Comics, like I think of a few eras and like types of stories that I love, a whole lot, and that kind of feel representative of the company or the brand or however you want to put it to me. And this era, and particularly this story, are very much that. And obviously,
Right.
like I already said, I have a personal connection to it. Because I didn't read comics, and then my cousin did, and now I'm reading comics, and this is one of the first runs that I even lay eyes on, and I didn't come back to it and appreciate it so much later. But there's just the things, the humanity of the characters, that how fucking New York it is. Like, there's a taxi cab guy in the bar at the beginning that just is like, check out this guy! Like, that's everybody that's not on the team or a member of the government is like, an extra out of The Godfather or something,
Yeah.
and which is so funny. And it's so New York. It's so slightly up its ass with continuity in a fun way for those of us that grew up reading that kind of comic. So it's like, for me, peak 1980s Marvel,
Right.
Unless you're going to go into an even more like a more adult direction, like with Frank Miller Daredevil or something like that, which I appreciate. But this is just fun.
It is fun. Yeah. I find myself, as I get older, I find myself appreciating this kind of stuff a little bit more.
Yeah.
The Bronze Age was just a great time. Like, it's all around. Like, it had a lot of this kind of fun stuff, but it also had like the darker stuff with Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen and all that stuff too.
Yeah. And I like the soap opera-ness of Avengers for the longest time, and it's true of this era. But I mean, maybe one reason it also stands out, and you've already mentioned it, is that it is a story on its own.
Right.
That you could step into, and not even because I'm worried about new people reading it. They could. That'd be great. But it makes it special because it wasn't. I mean, obviously, we were both reading comics during the Quesada Gemis years, where it's everything is a 4-issue story, everything's a 6-issue story, and it starts and ends, and then you start a new story that's not related to that story a lot of the time. This was a break from the norm, as far as I can see it. Not just the stakes, but the structure of it, and it was an event, and it just feels like they went for blood. Like, they truly went for blood on it. And I love it. I think it's so
absolutely
great.
Yeah, definitely. It's definitely worth a read. And like I said, it's available both in the Epic collection, and there's also just a shorter collection that just has these issues that are part of it. But the Epic collection is worth the read too, because it's got the Alpha Flight crossover in there. It's got the stuff with Namor. It's got the Kang Dynasty story, I think it was in there too.
And Namor on the team is great here because he's a little subdued, and Herc keeps trying to pull him out of his shell by pissing him off.
Yeah.
And so you've got two shirtless dudes in green swim trunks essentially beating the shit out of each other, and it's awesome. I love this relationship.
That's right, because this is the era when Hercules was wearing the green Speedo.
Pretty much, man. They're basically wearing the same thing, and then Herc is just like, oh, he's sad? I know what'll fix it. I'm a good friend, and just calls him names and punches him. And it's, I love it.
Okay, Will. So tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at WillShortHaha, and you can listen to me and my co-host Travis on the Days Past Tooncast. That is a podcast that we host. It is a comedy podcast about Saturday morning cartoons from yesteryear, and that's starting to include things like Spawn, the HBO animated series, not so Saturday morning. We've covered some superhero stuff, but we've also covered everything from the Flintstones to He-Man to Carmen Sandiego is coming up sometime soon. So you can find that at DP Tooncast on the social media, and Days Past Tooncast. You can just go find us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen.
Okay, great. Well, that does it for another Patreon exclusive episode. Will, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
Come on again if you want to talk more comics. And as for all of you, if you ever have anything you want to request that I review on this show, just go ahead and send me an email, superherocinephiles@gmail.com, or you can leave a comment on Patreon. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening. And as always, good night, good evening. God bless.